Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening to those of you who are joining from Sri Lanka. Good afternoon to those of you who are joining from the UK. Good morning to those of you who are joining from America and wherever else. I've said all the 3 time zones now. So today is going to be, it is a very interesting class. I think I found the topic quite interesting when I first learned the concept of group Kamma. It is not a new concept, although we might have not heard much about or heard the usage of the term group Kamma. Group Kamma is very much something which has been around, which was spoken about by the Buddha and Buddhas before him as well. And it is very much a practice within Bodhisattvas as well. And I think originally this part was essentially supposed to be discussed during our Wednesday Sutra class, but then I told the class, look, I think, it would be nice to have advertise this and let more people join in to listen, because it is such a relative, relatable and relative topic to all of us living in today's society, and very, very much apparent and important. So without much further ado, let us go ahead. So, because it is a broad topic, I am not exactly sure whether we will be able to share, everything that I hope to sort of elucidate on the topic of group Kamma, but we will try to do as much as we possibly can, and then if required and necessary, we will sort of go on to suggesting another day that we could continue the rest of the part. So group Kamma, basics of Kamma, right? Now, what is Kamma? We are not going to go into a deep analysis about what Kamma specifically is. I think we have gone over this subject. We do not need to cover this subject particularly, but I have outlined 3 necessary parts for Kamma, which is the word Kamma. The word Kamma comes about with the term kam, or the root K-A-M, which means action. So action, or the acting out of, is essentially Kamma. There will be time for question and answers. If you do have any, you do not have to feel shy. Of course, you can ask away anything that you cannot understand. Action, or the acting out of something, bodily, verbally, or even mentally, can become Kamma, right? Kamma is volition. Chetanaham bhikkhave kammam vadami. Chetana, volition. Volition becomes Kamma because volition is what gives Kamma a sense of identity. Hence, it becomes, or is known as, one of those factors which is Kamma. Kamma leads to Kamma resultant. So Kamma leads to a resultant which we call Kamma vipaka. Usually in colloquial transactions or correspondence, we would refer to, when we say it's a bad Kamma, we essentially, I believe, we refer to the Kamma resultant rather than the Kamma itself, right? But understand that they are two very different phenomena, Kamma and Kamma resultant. Is that understood, right? Now this is, this picture that I found on Google. And I thought it is very much, in line with how we are. We are nodes in an infinite network of energies. Our energies affect the energies around us, hence affecting the results that other people experience, hence affecting the results that we ourselves experience. We, although the nature of Kamma or the philosophy of Kamma speaks about individualism, Kamma is not individualistic when it comes to the resultants or the way that Kamma gives fruit or vipaka, right? Now, sorry about that. Yes. Now look at this chart, please. Now, this is a deeper part of Kamma. We have gone over, the students at the Abhidhamma class, we've gone over this before, right? But we've not looked at a diagram, right? This line here, can you see my cursor moving? Yes, oops, no. Now this line here is the present moment, as I have indicated. Within the present moment, we have the person living. This person who lives, this consciousness, everything that we hear, smell, taste, feel, this human experience, I have not indicated the rupa, the material body or material encumbrances of the world, but I have included everything to do with the unseen or consciousness or energy. These three, anusaya, which is latent tendencies, kammic potential. Why we do not say Kamma, yet we say kammic potential, is because Kamma itself does not have a negator or self. Hence, Kamma, like her, Kamma appears when the condition for it is present. So we might have a lot of good Kamma in the past, but if the conditions, the environment or the conditions, the people, supporting factors of environment and the people around us are not so good, then the conditions for good Kamma to appear cannot be present. Hence, although we might have a lot of good Kamma, we have now, or we are unable to bring its true potential to fruition in the moment. Do you understand? That is why I have not used the word Kamma, but I've used the word kammic potential. And then consciousness energy. These three operate within the present moment to give us the human experience that we experience in every single moment of life and samsara. These three, anusaya, kammic potential, and consciousness energy, all operate mutually conditioned and supporting one another. Kamma, anusaya, and consciousness. One cannot exist without the other up until we attain enlightenment. Right? Up until we finally do, and only the last stage of enlightenment, mind you, we will have these three operating within us, each and every single moment. Moving on. Now, interpersonal relationships and moral responsibility. Now we are slowly coming into group Kamma. Now what we have covered is Kamma. Now what is group Kamma? Now interpersonal relationships, we know we do not live on this planet. We do not experience a human experience alone, do we? We have family, we have friends, we have people that we know, we have people that we do not know. Even the random guy at the till at the grocery store, or the person who's managing your order, your online order, all of these people, when we interact, there is a connection, right? There is a connection. Interpersonal relationships and moral responsibility. When we speak of moral responsibility, whether as a social practice or a philosophical analysis, we refer to actions in the terms of interpersonal relationships, such as between family members, friends, neighbors, co-workers, clients, and even strangers. Whatever harm or problem incurred by one individual upon another individual is generally a private affair. There is a growing concern in modern societies that moral responsibility should cover a larger population, even the whole society, indeed the planet itself. Because what we choose to do, the things that we choose to put out, to say, to voice, the way that we choose to behave, influences other people's reactions and behaviors as well, right? Interpersonal relation. Now, this is a very important part and forms a structure and foundation of group Kamma. Now, Varma on Karma. It's a bit, it rhymes, Ishita, Varma on Karma. The theory of Kamma in the world is the first significant attempt in the history of human speculation to explain a man's destiny in the terms of his own personal endeavors. Before the notion of karma came along, there existed the tribal notion of collective responsibility. This collective responsibility often fell at the feet and judgment of God. Karma is the first significant protest against God and the concept of God, meaning it gave the moral responsibility to our own hands and lives and decisions that we chose to make. So karma is a very important part of our history, at least religious history. Karma, when we often look at good and bad, right and wrong, we often standardize our actions owing or having judgments over the actions relating to other people. However, in the Buddhist text, according to the Devaduta Sutta and Devaduta Yama Sutta, two suttas, we find this same quotation of how King Yama, when one upon death goes to hell, King Yama, how the judgments are given out, right? The evil deed was not done by your mother or your father, or by your brother or your sister, or by your friends and companions, or by your kinsmen and relatives, or by recluses or Brahmins, or by gods. This evil deed was done by you yourself, and you yourself will feel its result. I think this is a very powerful statement. Regardless of what religious doctrine would say, regardless of what our traditions, our cultures, our parents, regardless of what anyone says, humans and other superior beings with superior intellect should be able to make judgments on their own. That is part and parcel of being human, because we have that ability of mind, body, to be able to make those free judgments and calls. Allusions to group Kamma. Now, when we say group Kamma, we might relate to certain different variations of what group Kamma or the word might reflect. Here, we have the story of when the Buddha says that giving a gift to the Sangha is far more superior than giving to the individual, right? Then we had the story from Vacha, which says even if a pot of water containing the residue of food is thrown into a pool or pond, thinking may some entity, even the fish or whatever, feed on these remnants and be healthy, even that is a superior sort of Kamma, right? Alluding to the fact that when a karma is performed, of course, karma in Buddhism is always utilitarian. The useful nature of the act and the ethical nature of the act is what becomes most powerful, But this is not the group Kamma that I am specifically hoping to talk about to you today. But it is important that we cover the ground and realize what we are specifically not talking about, so that what we are intending to go into is much, much more clear. The common good. Karma is action. When we speak about action, now we know we have introduced karma, we've introduced a network of how the interdependency of Kamma is within beings and within different energies. Now we come down to this specific statement by the Buddha. One should not hurt oneself, others, or both. Remember this one? Yeah. The stock passages for this notion appear as follows. He will know his own good, the good of others, or the good of both. He will know his own good, the good of others, or the good of both. As one's own good, the good of others, or the good of both. One's own good, the good of others, or the good of both. One's own good, the good of others, or the good of both. Now, Kamma, even when it comes to the monastic code or the Panchasila, right? Or the Panchasila, we know the purity of Sila comes about when you do not do the wrong, when you do not make another do the wrong, or you do not condone the wrong, and you protect others from committing the wrong, right? Where now the virtue, the Sila, is almost robust in nature, where it covers all grounds. Now, the last one specifically of this relates to society and relates to actions and consideration of those actions pertain to oneself, another, and society as a whole. And society as the whole. Now, what are the examples that we have about this? Now, for example, the world generates 2.01 billion tons of municipal solid waste annually. How much garbage do we individually produce, right? According to the 2017 UN report, there are more than 51 trillion microplastic particles in the sea, more than 500 times the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy. Unlike plastic bags, fishing gear, and other microplastic waste, microplastics are so insidious because they are invisible to us, right? I've gone on to make a cheeky comment, what goes around comes around. Because you see, these microplastics is exactly what we eat in fish, right? These microplastics get into the food that we eat, and we then consume these foods. This itself, now with what we just covered here in this earlier slide, with regards to last, the social responsibility that we all have to think about according to the Buddha's teachings. Our consumption and the way our consumption relates to the lives and quality of life of society. Now, in Sri Lanka, 80% of the Western Province Sea is polluted. Now, we would then imagine in most cases, the waste that we produce, do we think about when we throw it out in a green bag or a black bag or a blue bag or whatever bag that we put into, we usually do not bother to think about where it goes afterwards, isn't it? Now, social moral responsibility covers these grounds, and these are very critical issues in today's society. Sri Lanka alone has or produces 7,000 metric tons of waste per day. That is how much waste Sri Lanka produces in a day. It is unfathomable how much we are polluting the environment. And all of this is a part of group Kamma. How? I will explain to you how. Examples of group Kamma. Now, when we find ourselves coming to hear the stories of the 5 months, the first 5 months, remember? The Pasvagamanu, right? Who attained enlightenment after listening to Dhamma from the Buddha. Yasa and his 54 friends who all attained enlightenment, right? The Kassapa brothers, right? Sariputta and Moggallana, Ananda, Bhaddiya, Anuruddha, Kimbala, and Devadatta. All of these are prime examples of group Kamma. How? Individuals who have endeavored through samsara, being inspired by a common goal or task. This is one aspect of group Kamma. Do you understand? Right? Now, let us go to some Buddhist stories of what we know about group Kamma. The Abhidhamma-kosa has a longer discussion on group Kamma. It states that if a group is united by the intention to kill, but only one of them does so, the whole group is guilty all the same unless one forced to join it resolves, even in order to save my life, I shall not kill a living being. Now, this is a very important part. You are forced to enact upon an action of killing. Within the action of killing, at any point in time, if the person resolves, okay, I'm doing this only because I have no other choice, still the action or the volition to kill is present, hence indulging within the group Kamma of killing. An exit from that Kamma or a freedom of that Kamma only comes about if the person says, even in order to save my life, I shall not kill. A direct, clear refute of the action should be made in order for the person to be free of that specific Kamma, right? Now, remember the story of Samavati and her 500 maidens. What did Samavati and her 500 maidens do? They were bathing by the river. One of the maidens lit a fire and threw it onto the grass, not knowing that a Pacheka Buddha, a silent Buddha, was meditating in the field. The field was set ablaze mistakenly. After the field was burned, they found that this Pacheka Buddha in a meditating posture was covered in coal, charcoal, but he was not dead, right? He was very much alive and he was in Nirodha Samapatti. But they did not know about all of these intricacies. So what did they do? They piled firewood all around the Pacheka Buddha in fear that if the remnants of the Pacheka Buddha's body was found, that the king would personally kill them all, because the king was very devoted to the Pacheka Buddha. So they tried to burn the Pacheka Buddha, right? Because of the intention to kill, what happened? Upon death, they suffered for 100,000 years in hell. Upon being born at the time of the Buddha, because at the time of the Buddha, they were still pious people, right? They were just fearful. Margandhya burnt all of them alive. At the time that Margandhya burnt them, what happened? This was the experience of group Kamma, which they had done together, supporting one another earlier when they tried to burn the Pacheka Buddha. So they all died, but at the time of death, they were all stream enterers. However, even Margandhya, after killing Samavati and her 500 friends, they too died horrible deaths. Not only Margandhya, but her relatives as well. This shows what a group Kamma is. But this is not all. This is not all. Then we have how Marga became Sakra. Now, Marga was a person who went around the city and he was making the city comfortable. He built benches, he built water pools for people to drink out of. He was doing all these nice things, right? And then a group of 33 young men decided to help Marga, thinking, oh, he's doing such a wonderful job. Let us also go and help him. He's making the city much more better and more comfortable, right? Upon death, the 33, along with Marga became Sakra, the 33 became gods under him. Group Kamma. Vidudabha and his vengeance. What is this about? Now, Vidudabha was the son of King Pasanadi. Now, King Pasanadi was married to a Sakyan woman who was the queen Vasasabhakatya. Vasasabhakatya was a low-caste Sakyan, right? The Sakyans knew about this. So when Vidudabha found out after the king's death, King Pasanadi's death, Vidudabha found this out, and he knew that the Sakyans did this most knowingly. This wasn't a mistake. So what happened? Vidudabha marched to the Sakya kingdom. This is where the Buddha sat under a ilka shaded tree 3 times. Remember the story? And he said, Maharaja, the wind that comes from the side of my relatives is very cooling to me. Right? Remember the story? The Buddha did this 3 times. The Buddha did this 3 times. And as we know, when the Buddha does this sort of a thing, at the 3rd time, usually the Buddha wins. This was the only occasion in the whole Triptaka that we know that the Yavatatiya, which means the three times method, Yavatatiya, at the passing of 3, right, that the Buddha's mission was not accomplished. This is the only instance that we know, right? Because why? Vidudabha returns for the 4th time. At that time, the Buddha knew This is not something which could be avoided because of the powerful karma the Sakyans had. In return, the powerful karma VIDUDABHAS had to also suffer from a Kamma. Right? So VIDUDABHAS massacred 77,000 Sakyans and enslaved 8,000 women and took over 500 Sakya maidens into his harem, but later on killed the 500 because they were talking behind his back. Right? They were talking behind his back. So he killed all of them. Some of them escaped to the high plateaus of the Himalayas, and they still live up until today, right? In the high plateaus of the Himalayas, the Sakyan people live even up until today. Now, after VIDUDABHAS committed this act of great unwholesome Kamma, VIDUDABHAS and the rest, after a war, they were sleeping at the dried out Ganga River. You know, even if you go today, there are seasons where the Ganga River dries out, isn't it? Right? And people sleep here. Even today, people camp out, right? So VIDUDABHAS, it is said that when they were sleeping, because of this Kamma, a heavy current came in the night, drowned them, and killed them all. Another example shown to be the result of group Kamma. But this story is not the complete one that I mentioned here. What happened? There is an inflicting of foreign occurrences in this story, which was when they were sleeping at night, ants come and bite the people who actually killed the Sakyans. Hence, the people who killed the Sakyans move into the river or the dried out river. The people who didn't kill the Sakyans moved out of the river. Hence, the people, it is said that only the people or the soldiers who killed the Sakyans, who were engaged in killing the Sakyans, died that night. Right? Now, Sariputta and the bats. We know that in the story of the Abhidhamma, the Buddha gave a summary of what he taught every single day when he came down. And then Sariputta taught this Abhidhamma to 500 monks who were under him. These 500 monks, a long time before, in their past birth, they were all Kiribaulo, the little, Baulo, right? They were in a cave, and nearby the cave were two monks, and they were chanting. Of course, they did not understand the chanting, but the way that the chanting was so welcome by these bats that they didn't know that it was Dhamma, but the sound of it itself, they sort of had a sense of cooling, welcoming sensation towards that sound. Because of that, upon death, it is said that they were reborn in the higher heavens, that then they slowly together, they found themselves in a position where they were all together as Sariputta students and learned the whole of the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the 7 books of the Abhidhamma from Venerable Sariputta. This is another example of group Kamma. Now, what can we learn about this? First, the example of the bats is, 500 monks. This is an example of wholesome group Kamma, while the rest were unwholesome group Kamma. The second is, I wanted to take this slide to bring out the fact that animals can have mental peace. Hence, do not be cruel to animals. I know that there were times, even in Sri Lanka, very foolishly, after a certain monk said that if you have pets in your house, you will be reborn as animals. All the people threw their, and most of the people threw their animals out onto the roads. This is not the way of Buddhists. If I had power, this monk would not even be in roads right now. Unfortunately, I don't have such kind of powers. But the thing is, the Dhamma is such that we have to realize the potential of animals also experiencing mental peace. And this is in no way an isolated experience. There is a story of the Buddha's horse Kantaka, the Bodhisattva's horse Kantaka. There is a story of the elephant and the monkey who took care of the Buddha while the Buddha was in retreat in the forest, who also were reborn in higher planes of existence. They were only taken aback by the compassion and the care and love of the Buddha, not by anything else. They did not understand anything. They were only taken aback by the compassion and love of the Buddha. Moving on. Now, what is this? Group giving, right? Layman, if one were to give but does not encourage others to give, wherever one is reborn, one receives the blessings of the following, but not the blessing of wealth. If one, I'm sorry, did I skip that? Wherever one is reborn, one receives the blessing of wealth, but not the blessing of following. But if one is not to give, but encourages others to give, one receives the blessing of following, but not the blessing of wealth. If one were not to give and does not encourage others to give, one does not so much as a bellyful of sour porridge, but is without refuge, without support. Then we have the instance, but if one were to give and also encourage others to give, wherever one is reborn in 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, one receives both the blessing of wealth and the blessing of a following. So when you are giving, we must be very careful not to assume a state of stinginess to protect our wealth and to encourage others to give. We must be able to give our own wealth as well as encourage others to give. Not out of any sort of cunningness, not out of any sort of evil intention to protect one's wealth and to get others to spend for the project, but out of the wholesome mind of getting others involved in good as you do good. This is what brings about the aspect of group Kamma, wholesome result. Now, group Kamma, this specific thing of group giving, how does it work? By working together in a common enterprise, the co-workers forge a karmic link with one another that will last for many lives. Since the enterprise is a wholesome one, the common bond is also wholesome. For giving and causing to give in abundance, one receives abundance in return for countless lives to come. For bringing together so many people in such a worthy enterprise, one wins a large and happy following. This is clearly how a work of merit works. Please do not assume Just because you want to be rich, that you could go in with a greed-filled mind. When it comes to merit, merit is the performance and the manifestation of wholesome. Wholesome does not have greed in it. That should be evidently more clear by now. It is with a pure mind, trained in the aspects of letting go and in the aspects of community, that we are able to truly pronounce and live the Dhamma, which in this case is talking about the works of merit, the works of merit. Remember that these performances of merit, this explains two very integral functions. One, I've made it bold, working together in a common enterprise. What does this mean? This means that the group that is giving or doing or performing this good is performing this good with a standard frame of mind that is shared by all. Do you understand? If one person, let's say, we always find within a group, there are always people who are either wealthier or some of them who are not so wealthy, isn't it? We always find this. The ones who are wealthy often spend more. Sometimes there are also instances where the one who is wealthy does not spend, but the one who is poor would give all that what she has also. This happens. Regardless, if the putting or the giving of wealth is done to show superiority or inferiority, this is not the common enterprise. Do you understand? The common enterprise is, which forges a karmic link, is when the whole group believes, puts aside their circumstances, or thinking of whatever which is going through their egotistical brains or thoughts, they put their minds into what is it that we are going to be doing. Do we understand? Do you understand the important part there? The linking, the forge in the karmic link comes about with that bond, not through just the act. Because this is very much a mental energy which is further supported and forged through physical action. Is that clear? You are very much welcome to ask me any questions that you have. Karmic links. Now we are slowly getting into the deeper parts of group karma. Although man creates his own individual karma, whatever he does will have its effect on his environment. Thus, he at the same time has a common family karma, a racial or national or group karma. Do you understand? A national or group karma. Now, this is not just a part of ancient thought. This is very much a part of current thought as well. And I will give you more examples to come, right? The good he does will not only benefit himself, but all others who live with and around him. That is all sentient beings and vice versa. Evil will not be suffered by him alone as well. Do you understand? Take the world that we live in as your biggest and most reliable example today. Kammic overflow, right? Kammic overflow. Now, karmic overflow is, let's first discuss this. Now, karmic links, right? when a Kamma is generated, now there are powerful people in this world, and there are people who are not that powerful. By powerful, what I mean is influence, right? Is influence. Influential people are called so because they are able to influence the emotions, reactions, behaviors of a crowd of people, or a community of people, or a country, or even sometimes the world, isn't it? Right? The world. Now, Kammic overflow. When that karma grows, when a person does, who is of certain power, does something, that karma, like a pot overflowing, overflows onto the mass population. The actions of one affecting the many. The Kuru Dhamma Jataka is about a kingdom facing a drought that resulted in famine and an impending plague. According to the story, the unfortunate situation had arisen because the king had not observed the Kuru code, or the Kuru Dhamma, that is the 5 precepts against killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and taking intoxication. Once the king began to observe these precepts, however, the rain fell and the land became fertile and prosperous. The second, Mani Chora Jataka. Sakra, the king of gods, is made to declare, if indeed a king is unrighteous, the rains fall out of season. They do not come in time, the fear of famine, disease, of the sword. These 3 fears prevail. Is this not true? Is this not true? When the nature of unrighteousness prevails, its country folk is affected, so much so that this will give about or give way to uprisings and unsettling situations within communities, instability. Even, I think I've mentioned this later, yes. Now, Washburn-Hopkins Kammic Overflow. Now, these are very popular and revered authors. Washburn-Hopkins has observed that a similar view is found in the Mahabharata, where it is said that the king determines the character of the age, that drought, flood, and plague arise through the misdeeds of the king. This is in the Mahabharata. MacDermott notes the similarity between this ancient idea and Silachara's concept. Silachara is another bhikkhu, right? Bhikkhu Silachara, I have also quoted him in the future. Concept of overflow Kamma. In both instances, the people must suffer for the misdeeds of their rule and in turn benefit from his morality as well. This idea correlates the idea of Demont, Silachara, Washburn-Hopkins are all in line with the most basic sutta of the Parabhava. What is a Parabhava? What does the Parabhava Sutta say? The last part of the Parabhava Sutta. Should you elect into the ruling class a man, a woman who can be bribed, that is the reason for the downfall of the whole country. This Silacharas, Washburn-Hopkins, and Demont, all of their views align with the Parabhava Sutta. Right? Now, moving forward. The individual giving. The individual giving. The true individual's giving is endowed with 5 qualities and their attending benefits thus. 1. Because he gives in faith, he becomes very wealthy and is of great beauty. 2. Because he gives with respect, he becomes very wealthy and his family and workers listen well to him. Because he gives at the right time, he becomes very wealthy and benefits come to him at the right time and in abundance. Because he gives with a hospitable heart, he becomes very wealthy and he is able to truly enjoy the sense pleasures. Because he gives without belittling anyone, he becomes very wealthy and suffers no loss of his wealth in any way on account of fire, water, the king thieves, or unloving ears. Giving with faith, respect, timely, hospitably, with kind words and praise, even for the person who is receiving it. These are important attributes of a giver. People will very easily forget what you did for them, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And if one makes them feel insuperior, insignificant, belittled because of the position that they have been in to be receiving gifts and aids of others, this is not a true giver's right form. Is that understood? Right? Let's think about our own lives. Do we not sometimes face with situations where we find it very difficult to be respectful towards certain people? Sometimes for some it is quite difficult. Just because people are poor, people assume that people are inferior, which is not true. When in what value-based society would riches be a measure of a person's worth? But this is the world that we live in currently, right? Respect is for human life and human potential. Moving on, mismatch of powers. When there is the ability or power, when there is the ability and power, when there is the ability or power for good karma to arise, there is no proper foundation to support the arising of that good karma, the mismatch of powers. The implication seems to be that apart from the effects of counter evil karma, the reward resulting from one's good works cannot be taken away. That cannot be taken away. Even the power of a king cannot avail this to the end. This suggests the recognition that no samsaric stream of existence is completely independent. It is not. Although each individual is, and here to the deeds, to his deeds alone, the ripening of his karma has consequences that reach beyond himself. Do you understand? It is not necessary, nor even very likely, that this notion implies a concept of overflow karma. However, rather, the point may be simply that in any given situation, the karma of each individual must be in confluence with that of every other participant in the situation. Do you understand? You have the karma. Let's take this example. Now the Buddha has done so much of good karmas, but how long did he live? 100. He was born to a span of life which was 120 years, wasn't it? Right? 120 years. That was the Ayush Kalpa for that time. But do you think that the Buddha only had Ayusha or the karmic potential to live 120 years? Definitely not. Definitely not. However, he lived for 120 years because the world Kamma at that point only allowed for 120 years. Do you understand? Now, the karma of the Buddha is now affected by the karma of the world, nation karma, the karma of the world at that time. The karma of the world is influenced by what? Through the influx of actions of good and bad throughout the universe time span. We know there are time spans mentioned in the doctrine where Buddhas live for 60,000 years. And then there are time spans where the Buddhas live for 120 years. Do you understand? When it comes to the beauty of the Buddha, the beauty of the Buddha always corresponds with the beauty of the time. Have you heard that? Whatever which is regarded as beautiful and handsome at the time of his birth, those are the qualities or features of his body. Do you understand? Now, do you understand the mismatch of powers? Right? The mismatch of power is brought about, or rather the karmic potency or the karmic fruit is then affected by the karma of society, the environment to which you are brought into. Do you understand? Now, when we say karma, the reason that I showed you the network nodes at the beginning of the presentation is to give you the idea that karma is action. Actions are connected. What is an action, or what does the action comprise of? An action is a manifestation of a particular type of energy. Is that understood? A particular type of energy. Whether it is verbal, whether it is physical, whether it is mental, or whether it is otherwise, it is a manifestation of a particular type of energy. This particular type of energy is not only squared off to independent energy, it is also squared off to the energy that we feel in the environment that we live in. Do you understand? That is essentially the basis of group Kamma, right? Of group Kamma. Although each individual is here to his own deeds alone, the ripening of his karma has consequences that reach beyond himself. It is not necessary, nor even very likely, that this notion implies a concept of overflow karma. Now, this is not an overflow of karma, right? It only implies that, let us say, a cheesecake has 50 grams of sugar, right? Nowadays, right? 30 years from now, the common cheesecake would have 30 grams of sugar. You have the karmic potential to eat a cheesecake with a lot of sugar. But now, whether it is 50 grams or 30 grams is dependent upon the time that you live in. Do you understand? Take the time of the Great Depression cooking, right? Cooking during the Great Depression, where you had to be very, very, none of us lived through the Great Depression, yeah? No. Did we? All right, I didn't for sure. So, so the Great Depression, during that time, people had to really be careful of how they cooked, right? So the quality of what you would experience, maybe you had the karma to experience best available, but that is the best available dependent upon the environment that you live in. Now, do you understand? You gave very good, healthy, sweet things as donations. You fed people with such richness. However, you received that richness as a manifestation or affected by the quality of karma around you at the time. Do you understand now? Right? This is not karmic overflow. This is just cause and effect. Right? Cause and effect. Now, moving on. The story of Ajatasattu. Now, Ajatasattu killed his father. He was at one time, he was trying to kill the Buddha himself, right? But later on, he became so piously devoted to the Buddha. Ajatasattu's son killed him, right? Ajatasattu's son was killed by his son. And this continued for generations around generations. The dynasty was at the end all removed and killed by the community, the people of Magadha, because they knew that this lineage of patricide, father murderers was a bad omen for the whole country. So they removed that whole lineage and then appointed Susunaga as king, right? As Susunaga as king. It is important to understand that only the parricidal tendency in these kings that is due to greed, hate, and delusion is a karmic factor. But the destruction of the dynasty was a result of social conditions. People just did not accept it. Do you understand? Right? Now, a good example of negative family karma. Families who, as a practice, own farms, slaughterhouses. It is very well known that these families often experience the birth of children who are deformed. I do not know whether this is politically correct to say. I am only speaking as a teacher of Dhamma, right? It is very well known that families who live off the inflicting of pain and horror upon beings also would, in one form or another, be inflicted by the same horrors into their life. Bhikkhu Silachara on karmic overflow. Countless millions of beings. Now, this is speaking countless millions of beings born in the lands of the East, in India and Ceylon, in China, in Japan, in Burma, in Siam, which is Thailand, in the far-spreading plains of Mongolia, have had their karma completely changed for the good through overflow karma of no one else than Gautama, Buddha, Bodhisattva. The Buddha and that karma has not yet exhausted itself. It is still flowing on, and in its flow, fertilizing the mind and enriching the hearts of many, even today in the spiritual dullard West. Now, this was in 1959. Right? So, spiritual dullard West, who happily are open to receive this influence, right? Now, today in 2021, I think most of you who are living overseas would agree with me that the spiritual movement has become far more powerful in the West, with much, much more authentic movement compared to the East. I know the East and the people living in the East won't be too happy to hear this, but this is the truth. Even through legislation and policy change within the UK alone, we experience situations where mindfulness through legislation is now taught at schools, which we do not find in Sri Lanka or countries as such, right? Now, this is that overflow Kamma. Isn't it so? Even regardless of whether you are born into a different religion, the whole of Asia still experiences influences of the Buddha's teachings, karma, to such a strong extent in the modern world, even after the Buddha passed, right? Even 2,600 years after the demise of the Buddha, right? The demise of the Buddha. Now, so what exactly is group? Sujata, please don't draw the paper. Now, what exactly is group Kamma? The synthesizing the views of two men, that is within the Milinda Panya and Venerable Silachara, then it would seem that group Kamma can be categorized to either the overflow of Kamma on one hand, or as the karma of family, a group resemblant on the other. Do you understand? The overflow of Kamma and the karma of a family or group that has enacted upon a certain resemblance of an act, right? Or a common ground of an act. Now, however, not that simple. Why isn't it that simple? Because karma, an important aspect of Kamma, is also justice. Do you understand? Justice for what? Justice for the actions that one is responsible for committing, right? Hence, karma is most importantly a measure or a way that one goes through the justice of the universe in terms of the action one chooses to commit. So how is it not that simple? In either case, it is to be noted, neither the principle of individual responsibility nor of karmic justice is necessarily negated. Individual responsibility of karmic justice, right? Or karmic justice. It is only in bringing both of these elements together that we can come into a correct answer. In the case of overflow karma, the individual does a deed, the reward for which he experiences, while at the same time the deed has its effect on others, each of whom is influenced by as a result of his own individual karmic past. With respect to the karma of the family or other communal resemblance, it is simply the common aspects in the action of certain individuals which lead them into membership in a group, the communal experiences of which are due to each individual member as a result of his own individual past. To add up another of Bhikkhu Silachara's images, each individual karmic thread is woven into the fabric of existence so as to make a meaningful pattern of the whole. It shouldn't only be meaningful to one. It has to be meaningful to the whole crux of existence that it applies to. Do you understand? right? What is meant by this is this, right? I've put in, the cheeky message, the complex web baby, that's only a cheeky remark. But what is it that this negates? When a karma happens to an individual, that specific karma goes through the effects of many parts of the universe. For example, a karma which affects the mother of the house would in return affect all of the inhabitants of the house, isn't it? The mother is diagnosed with cancer. Let's, for the sake of example, say it is karma. For the sake of example. Not that all cancers arise because of karma. Then, because of this news of the cancer, this affects, let's say, 10 people live at home, children, grandchildren, husband's family. Yeah, let's say 10 people live at home. Now, this karma, which is to be experienced by you are the one who committed an action in the past, which has now brought about the circumstance for you to become a cancer patient, right? However, why is it that because you did something wrong, I must suffer for it? Do you understand? Right? You did something in your past. Why should I be suffering for your karma? Because you did it long time ago. Births and lifetimes and lifetimes ago. Why am I suffering for it? Because I do suffer, isn't it? Because your child or anyone living in the house will suffer. So then, on the grounds of accountability of karma, has to be taken into consideration to really decide the impact of group Kamma and Kammic overflow. So what Mac de Mont says is, when he uses Silachar's adaptation of a Kammic thread woven into the fabric of existence, now that Kamma that is experienced by me is also supported by the Kamma of the 10 people living at home. Do you understand? That is the intricate web of the complexity of Kamma and Kamma result. Of Kamma and Kamma result. Let's move on. Now, we do not have time to finish, right? Because there is a whole part on Kammic justice that we had to carve, which is the implications of Kamma and the applicability of justice when it comes to this sort of a Kamma. So next week, Saturday, same time, right? Next week, Saturday, same time, we will be doing, so I know today is Sunday, okay? So next week, Saturday, 2 p.m. for the UK, 6:30 for Sri Lanka, we will be continuing on this, this chapter, right? The next course, which we will be then finalizing, group Kamma. Now, national Kamma. Now, national Kamma was first spoken by Gio Narayan in the 1940s, right? 1930s, as I remember, right? Now, Egerton C. Baptist, right, cites the Dhammapada story of VIDUDABHAS, which we have just gone through, and the massacre of the Sakyans to support his case of national Kamma. Now, VIDUDABHAS' army died. VIDUDABHAS' army died, as well as the Sakyans died. Both national Kamma. Do you understand? I really want to mention an example, but I might just disappear in a white van if I do. So I'm not going to say it. In the mid-1950s, and the early 70s, this was done in Burma, and Burma still does this in different ways, right? The government of Burma, modern Myanmar, participated in various religious activities that led Donald Eugene Smith to interpret these activities as unmistakably an attempt to manipulate karma. Now, this is a very strong belief in the country. The importance of maintaining strong, powerful, wholesome karma, not just individually, but as a nation. The Chatta Sanghayana was one of those attempts, right? Annually, we also have the giving of alms at Shredagong Pagoda or on the road leading to Shredagong Pagoda, where you might have seen pictures of 500,000 monks all being served alms. Thailand does it, Burma does it, right? Thailand does it, Burma does it. Sri Lanka does it time to time, but not as common and not so grandiose in nature, right? This is in line with the king's idea that maintaining the karma of the land is important, right? Is important. Now, national karma through legislation and policy. How can karma, good karma, be a part of legislation and policy of a country? Now, I've taken the example of the famous Burman, Utala Ung, right? Now, this was a statement that he made. This was a statement that he made in regards to how to treat the poor in a country in the Association for Religious Freedom in Chicago in 1958. Calling for an economic system midway between capitalism and communism, suggested that the concept of karma needed a state-initiated move for the desired effect in these times, in such times. In an address before the International Association for Religious Freedom in Chicago in August 1958, he proposed that just distribution of tax money to aid the poor. There will be no need to pull the rich down to the level of the poor. His karma will bring him down to the correct level, but the poor must be helped. And whether he stays put on the high level or not, despite the fair and just laws, is after all his karma. Do you understand? Right? How the notion of karma was suggested to be sort of a part of national legislation and policy. Now, karma and justice. Now, just this is what we will be doing next week, right? Which is a very important part, because this is where what everything that we have studied through will be reconciled into its applicability in terms of karma, because karma is nothing without karma vipaka. So how does it give karma vipaka is a big question, and karma vipaka is a manifestation of justice. Now, the characteristics of karmic results. Such results can only be said to be relatively commensurate with the action, but there is really no way of measuring them, right? There is no way of measuring the karmic relativity of with regards to the action. Who deserves more who deserves less. Karmic causes and effects do not occur singly or or in a linear manner, but as a network of coefficient causes and effects. Do you understand? This is what I've been trying to manifest even with the image of the network. It does not only depend on you, it depends on your socio-economic climate, your financial situation, the environment that you live in, the society that you live in, the beliefs of the society that you live in, the political standards, the legal laws, the human rights. All of these things factor in to the karma that you experience in your life, right? Karmic results will persist as long as the conditions that feed them persist, and often in terms become the conditions for more karma. Karmic results are not merely just results, but more often arise by way of creating and reinforcing one's latent tendencies of lust, aversion, and ignorance. Do you understand? Because karma works with consciousness, going back to that 5th slide that I showed you, the 4th slide. Karma, potential, consciousness, energy, and anusay. These things are interlinked. These 3 are interlinked, right? Hence, karma being active is the reapplication of these 3 within a person's life. Within a person's life. Then we have karmic results do not always have the same effect on the same person all the time. With spiritual training, for example, we will be able to allow the portion to pass without being adversely affected by that respective karma. Do you understand? So it is not only about, okay, this will happen and this will come about. No, the reasons of karma change. What we experience will change. And as and when it does change, the results will also effectively change. This is what Guru Kamma for today is. So to bring everything into a state of better clarity, it should be understood that Guru Kamma represents the karma that we have committed, the karmic links that we have created through common action, supported through common attitudes of mind, which create karmic links between persons. These persons experience similar karmas in the future as a result of the karmas that they produce. Karmic energy, when done by powerful persons or by a community, has a tendency to overpower the network nodes of a system to create the phenomena which is known as Rammic Overflow, which then overflows into changing an entire community or environment that we would live in. For an example, we could take the time where certain presidents being racist made way for the population to become more racist. We experienced this in UK with the increase of knife crime. We experienced this happening in the US, all over the world, against persons of different color, even in the 21st century. So when one chooses to speak, when one chooses to act, when one chooses to take a specific political or a data specific side, one must relate to the effect that it can have upon the community. The inacceptance in one's heart, how it pours onto different parts of the community, making communities less appreciative or accepting of difference and diversity within communities. A good lesson that all of us who have moved to different countries other than Sri Lanka, to countries in the West, experienced is we were part of the majority population in Sri Lanka, being Sinhala and most of us being Buddhist. I was Catholic. Regardless, part of the majority. We never experienced sadness, the frustrations, the minority. But we were very happy to make judgments, critical analysis of the minority based on color, based on segregated parts of that specific minority. But now, having moved to the West and living in the West, now we understand what we did in Sri Lanka, don't we, everyone? Right? We are now the victims of the same abuse that we might have slung in the direction of the minority when we were once the majority. This is something that I always contemplate. It is not that fun when we are the victims. It is not at all fun. This is bipartisan. The discussion concerning karma and moral responsibility, which befalls all of us when it comes to the things that we do, when it comes to things that we support, the people that we support, when it comes to things that we consume as food, the ways that we produce, all of these things create the environment around us. Next week, Saturday, at 2 p.m. UK time, 6:30 Sri Lankan time, 9 a.m. US, Washington, D.C. time, we will be having the second part of the program. Of this, we'll be finishing karmic potency. Group Kamma. This will be up on YouTube. This will be up right away. You just have to visit the Dhamma Center website. This will also be up on our Facebook page. So with all the merits that we have accrued through the discussion of Kamma, through the discussion and sort of going into the detailed facts of Kamma, let us share all of this merit with all the people all across the world, even maybe our family, distant and near family, who might be undergoing suffering, who might be undergoing injustice, inequality, due to the pandemic situation that we are all experiencing the world over, be it Sri Lanka, the US, the UK, Africa, or even in Russia, regardless, wherever these people might be, regardless of caste or creed, nationality, religion, or birth, may all beings with the power of this merit arrive at states of mental and physical health and well-being. May all beings be well and happy. May we be protected by the Dhamma, by all the efforts made to bring about this discussion, be shared by all of you and me, my family and your families, distant and near. May all of you be blessed with the ability to grow in strength, allowing for us to grow into higher heights of Dhammic development. May we all be able to realize the fruits of what the Buddha was trying so hard to teach us. May we all be well, happy, and peaceful. Therwan Saranam.
Okay.
Okay. You can actually answer some questions if you have any questions.
Bhante.
Yes. Udyanti?
No, Bhante, I don't have a question. Just thank you. That's all.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, does anyone have any questions? Okay, no questions. Very well. Thank you very much for joining. Take care and have a wonderful. Oh, yes, Vishaka. Yes, Vishaka. I did see a question. Bhante, how do we avoid going to hell and to be born as a Buddhist in samsara? Right. Vishaka, how do we avoid going to hell? The first way is to stop fearing hell. Is the first and most important of not going to hell. It might sound like I'm trying to be funny, but actually I'm not. Fear is the main reason why people are dragged to hell. The fear of hell is a dosa mula chitta. That is why we train in meditation to prepare ourselves for the inevitable future that we will face. And within that future, death will be a part of that future. Right? So how are we able to be born as a Buddhist in samsara? The only way to be born as a Buddhist, I think the important part is to be born as a practicing Buddhist, or to be born as a person with the intelligence to practice rather than be a namesake, right? Now, how we can do that is not to cling on to the aspect of Buddhism, but to cling on to the aspect, or to be happy upon the aspect of the Dhamma. Do you understand? ධර්මය පිළිබඳව ආසාවක් කැමැත්තක් ඇති කරා ගැනීමෙන් සසරේ තව දුරටත් බෞද්ධ උප්පත්ති ලැබන්න එන්න එවැනි දෙයක් හේතු වාසනා වෙනවා. Right? If we have a connection to the Dhamma, that is when we will be born a Buddhist or practicing Buddhist, because being a Buddhist doesn't really mean anything. Right? Being a practicing Buddhist is what it means, right? So that, I hope I've answered your question, Vishaka. Right? All right. Please share the recording, complex Kamma, very clear. All right, it's on YouTube. Okay, I think that is all the questions. So take care, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day. All the very best. Terwan Salman.